Before we start this subject, a clarification. This is a subject that isn't going away, and that's exactly why it needs to be talked about properly rather than emotionally. Artificial intelligence now sits right in the middle of creative work, whether we invited it in or not. There are legitimate arguments for and against it in the literary field, and pretending it's either pure evil or a miracle solution doesn't help anyone understand what's actually happening. If we step back and put the old, "Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human," fear to one side for a moment, we can be honest about two things at once. This is an extraordinary feat of engineering. It really is. And at the same time, it comes with real costs, environmental costs, cultural costs, and cognitive costs that we're only just beginning to understand. But none of this is new. The same arguments were made about the wheel, the steam engine, mass production, the printing press, the dictionary, the calculator, the personal computer, and the mobile phone. Every major technological shift caused disruption, resistance, and genuine concern. It's evolution. It's messy. It causes harm. But it isn't going away. The only useful response now is understanding where it helps, where it damages, and where responsibility still belongs with us. 1. Why this question exists. People keep asking whether ChatGPT can write a novel, not whether it can help with research, assist with grammar, or offer suggestions, but whether it can write one outright. Beginning to end, fully formed. And the fact that this question keeps resurfacing tells us something important about how writing is being framed right now. Writing is increasingly being treated as output rather than authorship, as speed rather than meaning. The emphasis has shifted away from thinking and toward producing, away from wrestling with ideas and toward filling pages as quickly as possible. That shift matters more than the technology itself. Novels were never just containers for words. They were containers for thought, for contradiction, uncertainty, memory, and pressure that builds over time. They exist because some ideas don't fit into short explanations or fast solutions. So when people ask whether a machine can write a novel, what they're really asking is whether the hardest part of writing, sustained thinking over time, can be skipped while still claiming the result. Assisted versus generated, a necessary distinction. From a literary perspective, we need to slow down and make a distinction that keeps getting blurred. There are two very different ways artificial intelligence shows up in writing: AI-assisted writing and AI-generated writing. AI-assisted writing means the author remains the author. The thinking stays human. The decisions stay human. The story, the voice, and the responsibility all remain with the writer. Tools might help with research, naming things, organizing notes, or checking surface-level issues, but intent and judgment remain human. AI-generated writing is something else entirely. That's when the machine produces the text itself, scenes, structure, even voice, and the human steps back into a supervisory role at best. From a literary standpoint, that isn't assistance, it's substitution. This distinction matters because literature isn't defined by efficiency or output. It's defined by authorship. If we don't separate these two uses clearly, we end up arguing past each other and misunderstanding what writing actually is. Why writers aren't panicking. People who genuinely understand fiction aren't afraid of artificial intelligence. They're not panicking about being replaced, and they're not worried about machines suddenly becoming great novelists. What they are feeling is irritation and fatigue. That fatigue comes from watching the market fill with work that looks finished but isn't finished in any meaningful literary sense. Writing has always involved drafts, failure, revision, and judgment. When those stages are skipped or disguised, the result can look polished on the surface while remaining hollow underneath. Writers know the difference between something that resembles a novel and something that actually functions as one. They also know that trends pass. The novelty of machine-generated books wears off once readers realize that clean sentences don't automatically add up to depth, insight, or emotional weight. This isn't fear, it's exhaustion. Exhaustion at seeing writing reduced to a technical shortcut rather than a craft built through time, thought, and restraint. Planning and authorship. Writing purely on instinct can be useful for practice, but it's a risky way to approach a novel. At some point, authorship requires orientation. You need to know who the story belongs to, what problem drives it, and what must change by the end, even if those answers evolve as you write. An outline doesn't have to be rigid or prescriptive. It can be loose, flexible, and responsive to discovery. The purpose of planning isn't control, it's direction. Without that direction, stories tend to drift, stall, or collapse under their own weight. This is one of the places where artificial intelligence can't replace authorship. Orientation requires intention. It requires understanding why the story matters and why these events are meaningful. Those decisions aren't technical, they're interpretive. Planning doesn't limit creativity, it protects it. It gives imagination somewhere to stand so discovery doesn't turn into chaos. Speed versus finishing. Wanting to finish something feels good. Wanting it over with is different. When speed becomes the main goal, writing turns into task completion rather than craft. The aim shifts from building something meaningful to simply reaching the end as quickly as possible. A novel isn't just drafting words. It's discovery, collapse, rebuilding, revision, and restraint. Each stage matters. Skipping one doesn't save time. It creates more work later, often at the most discouraging point in the process. Readers can tell when a book has been rushed. Stories need time to settle, to reveal what's broken, and to show the writer what they actually want to be. Many problems only appear after distance, not during momentum. Finishing matters, but how you finish matters more than how fast you get there. Editing is the work. Outlining may be optional. Editing isn't. Many writers assume the book is finished when the final chapter is written. In reality, that's often the halfway point. Editing, revising, reshaping, and rewriting is where the book actually becomes what it's meant to be. Editing isn't just proofreading or fixing grammar, it's structure, pacing, clarity, emphasis, and meaning. These are decisions only the author can make, because they require understanding the intent of the work as a whole. This is where the idea of outsourcing writing breaks down completely. Editors don't replace writers, they collaborate with them. Even the best editor can't supply meaning that isn't already there. If the writer isn't willing to revise their own work, the book never fully arrives. Editing isn't an extra step, it's the work. AI and originality. Artificial intelligence doesn't invent in the way humans do. It remixes. It relies on existing material, patterns, and examples to generate text. That can be useful for research or summaries, but it isn't creativity in the literary sense. Originality in fiction doesn't come from plot alone. It comes from perspective. Two writers can describe the same event and produce completely different stories because they bring different histories, values, instincts, and emotional weight to the page. AI has no lived experience. It has no memory it can return to, no internal pressure it needs to resolve, no personal sense of risk or meaning. When it writes, it can sound competent, but it can't sound necessary. It doesn't stay awake at night turning a problem over. It doesn't wake from deep sleep with a solution that's been forming for days or weeks. Once it gives an answer, pushing it further doesn't deepen understanding. It dilutes it, reshaping responses to satisfy the question rather than to resolve anything real. That absence shows, not as an error, but as emptiness. AI writing feels vague. One of the most common qualities of AI-generated fiction is vagueness. Characters have generic jobs, settings feel blurry, conflicts exist, but without sharp edges. Everything sounds reasonable, but nothing feels lived in. Stories need specificity, concrete details, real pressures, real environments, real constraints are what make fiction believable. Specificity allows readers to inhabit a world rather than just observe it from a distance. Motivation matters too. Characters shouldn't act just because. Their actions should grow out of fear, desire, obligation, or history. AI struggles here because it doesn't understand why actions matter, only that actions should occur. If you're capable of supplying all of that yourself, the question becomes obvious. Why not just write the story yourself? Subtlety and meaning. Good writing often works by implication rather than explanation, meaning lives between lines in what's left unsaid. Readers enjoy making connections and discovering patterns on their own. Artificial intelligence doesn't operate that way. It explains everything because it doesn't know what to withhold. It can describe emotion, but it doesn't know when silence would be more powerful. This is why show, don't tell is so difficult for machines. Showing relies on human inference, on shared understanding of context, gesture, and consequence. That understanding isn't computational. It's experiential. Editing AI-generated text doesn't solve this unless the editor already understands story deeply. Without that understanding, revisions remain cosmetic. You polish the surface, but the structure underneath stays the same. Authorship and ownership. Authorship isn't just a creative idea. It has real consequences. If you didn't author the work, you don't own it in the same way, either legally or ethically. That distinction matters more than many people realize. In many places, AI-generated content can't be copyrighted like human-created work. That creates uncertainty about ownership, responsibility, and accountability. If a machine produced the text, who is actually responsible for it? But beyond law, there's authorship as responsibility. Writing means standing behind choices, what you included, what you cut, and what you implied. Tools don't carry that responsibility. People do. Why writing is worth doing. Writing isn't about proving that you produced something. It isn't about having pages to upload or a finished object to point at. Writing is thinking. It's one of the ways humans work out what they believe, fear, and value. Stories exist because they let us hold complexity without resolving it too quickly. They let us sit with contradiction, change our minds, and see the world through someone else's eyes. Artificial intelligence can help with research, names, and surface questions. Those are tools. But novels are written by humans because stories are how humans understand themselves and each other. If you remove that struggle, the uncertainty, the revision, the slow understanding, you don't just change how the book is made. You change what the book is. Conclusion. So, this is my take. I know there are strong opinions on all sides of this, and some of them are thoughtful, serious, and worth listening to, even at a Frank Herbert level of caution. But whatever your position, one thing is certain, this isn't going away. Artificial intelligence is already here, already embedded in creative work, and already shaping how writing is framed and valued. The question now isn't whether it should exist, but how it's used, and where responsibility still belongs. If we ever reach true artificial general intelligence, then the conversation changes and real concern begins. Until then, this isn't a crisis, it's a craft question. So if this gave you a pause for thought, like, share, and look out for my journey as I fund, edit, and, God willing, publish my B.U.D.S book in the fall of this year. And yes, once the paperback happily does happen, I will be book signing. Ha ha ha.